You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Sagrona. Welcome to Reaction Chat, brought to you by those scrappy rebels over at fanfatracks.com. We're back covering Season 2 of Andor, a Star Wars story. And we will be covering episodes 13 through to 15, which makes up the first story arc of Season 2. Block 1 of Season 2 was directed by Ariel Climate, so consider this your spoiler warning. I've had to wait for the rambunctious Mr. Newbold to return from his trip to Japan. But for now, Mark, Season 2 of Andor, it's basically a movie a week, and we've had a lot of different Star Wars shows since we left Ferrix at the end of Season 1, which was, I think, November 2022? So it's good to be back in Andor's world, isn't it?
It really is. It's familiar in a way that Skeleton Crew wasn't familiar. It felt familiar quickly because we liked the kids and we liked the worlds they created, and it was such a charming show. It was easy to get into the swing of it. And our Acolyte by design was completely new and something totally different. And we saw some familiar places, obviously Coruscant, but most of that was pretty fresh and new and brave and bold. And good luck if there's ever a return to that part of the Star Wars timeline. But Andor, completely, within seconds, you're totally back into the vibe of Season 1 because Season 2 is just that again. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about these episodes with you, as always, and digging into Andor, a Star Wars story.
It's good to be back. And also, I think now the general viewer, I think, is a little bit more geared up and to what to expect from this show, from Tony Gilroy and this kind of series. And obviously there are things that happen across the first 3 episodes, which is kind of like firsts really for Star Wars. But generally the kind of tone and all the different kind of emotions and the subtext that's going on is actually quite nice because, yeah, we've had, especially with Skeleton Crew, very kind of sweet and easygoing, and, you know, it's like having your dessert that. But this is really the meat and potatoes. And of that era, this is definitely this is really kind of like fibrous stuff to chomp on and get into. So let's start then. Episode 13, 1 year later, which is quite helpful because we kind of get that through the before BBY. So it's good that that's kind of returned to give us an idea of like where we are on the timeline. In a way that us Bond fans kind of refer to it, it's a bit of a cold opening. We've got Andor straight away in the mission. He's on Shinar in Test Facility 73, where he's basically been tasked with a mission to steal the prototype TIE Avenger. We're straight into it. We see a Cassian who is more secure, more mature in the kind of role that he is actually going to be portraying, at least for the first 3 blocks anyway. And it kind of kicks off in a way that actually is quite, obviously it's quite funny, but also there's some really heartwarming moments with the conversation he has with the technician there, the rebel plant.
I love the opening to it. It's exactly like you say. It's like the opening of a Bond film. It's like the opening of Raiders when you're finishing off the previous adventure almost. And as an action sequence, it's the first 15 minutes of the film or the show, really. It's what they showed at the sneak peek. And to have an action sequence as well, because one of the criticisms of the first arc of Season 1 was that it was quite slow. When you look back at it, there's more going on than you think. But Tony Gilroy and team are very good at laying the ground for all the characters, the places that you go. And certainly episode 1 year later, you really are bedding in the season. You've got the different characters in their different places. And this is showing you that after that last tense, kill me or take me in moment at the end of Season 1, we're now, as you say, 1 year later, and Cassian has dived into the role. So he's the one, like you say, Test Facility 73, Shinar. It's great to see Shinar. I've hearing about it since West End Games roleplay. I was
going to say, that's really early EU, isn't it?
Yeah. Way back, yeah. So to see that was cool. But also for him to be the one giving the motivational speech, you know, she's like, I was told not to look at you. You're risking everything. You can ask me anything you want. It's just enough of a conversation, just even the little moments. I think that's Tony Gilroy's genius, is it's all the little moments, like when she has to talk with the technician and he's like, what did she say? Oh, she thinks he's cute. You know, those little things like that were just little moments that just break the tension. And then you basically get Cassian stealing a TIE Avenger, which is fantastic to see because we've seen it over time. But I mean, TIE Fighter, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter was where we really first saw it.
Yeah, exactly. But also, let's be fair, he stole a TIE fighter in probably the same kind of way that me or you would have stolen that TIE fighter.
Completely. Oh, God. I mean, it's the worst gaming cock-up ever. You push forward, you expect to go forward, you don't expect to go backwards.
No.
And he's looking at that cockpit. I mean, he couldn't find the seat until he sits on the stool and the seat comes around. The worst escape. Just awful. Cassian, what are you doing?
It does kind of slightly highlight a couple of things, actually. I think it kind of more apparent in the next episode, but it sounds very much like he wasn't expecting to steal that version of a tie. How much information he's been given, and how much information Luthen's been passing on to him is interesting. And whether or not that will have a ramification later on, don't know. But because I think actually what it really encapsulates is for spycraft. He's basically like many spies did in World War One and World War Two, but they use their charm, they use their good looks to kind of reassure people. And it was Nye, wasn't it, the technician about who's like really nervous and stuff, and he's very calming. And on one hand, you go, that's really nice because he's being supportive, but basically it's because he just needs to get the thing. He probably, inside is just going, I just need to get you to open up, the hangar, get me in so I can steal the thing, and then we'll probably never see each other again. But at the same time, it might be quite nice if we do see her again, because it's a nice touchstone. So
it is. And also, like you say, he gets the codes that he needs. He gets into the ship. He takes out the droid, blasts his way. I mean, he takes out the guy with the rocket launcher, takes him out completely.
The range trooper.
The range trooper blows out the doors, gets out of the hangar, and then hangs on the edge of the cliff as the other ties are coming in. That whole sequence, it was ILM at their best. I noticed you're wearing an ILM 50 t-shirt. Very cool. Absolutely fantastic sequence, movie quality sequence. And then gets away. So he's used his personal skills to get to the point where you're going to have enough time to get away. Is 10 minutes enough? Yes, 10 minutes is enough. We won't find out in this episode if she does or doesn't get away. But there goes Cassian with the ship, gets off planet. And then we're sort of skipping around all of the various characters, which was wonderful.
The first episode, I was like, wow, it's pacing really well. It's jumping all over the place, and it's giving you those touchstones of like, so where Deda is, this is where Mon is, and it's like, okay, so we jumped a year, and it's for wedding. That first scene with that really impressive one-er, that single shot of her walking down, all the way down, once she finds out about Luthen's there, and she's kind of being stopped on the way, and she meets Velma, and it's a really, really clever way of getting a load of exposition delivered to the viewer in a very succinct way.
But you pick up very quickly that Mon and Davos Squadron are actually not... she's not clawing his eyes out like you thought she might be. There's a connection there. They're about to be in-laws, and you can see there's a connection. When she sees Luthen, the little moment she has with Vel, clearly Vel's gone home and bedded herself back into Chandrilan society. So there's just enough going on. And Perrin's not a complete dick as well.
Season 1, I think the last time we see Perrin, basically, they have that kind of blazing row in the taxi cab where she's like, you're gambling again. And obviously she did that to kind of plant that information with the ISB agent, but actually, that's
where the money's going.
That's where the money's going. So don't look at me, it's always been a weird dynamic for their relationship. It's kind of like, again, we're reminded that it's kind of like an arranged marriage, but there's kind of this weird kind of like dynamic going on. And again, I guess it's because we're kind of actually more in Perrin's wheelhouse. We're in the entertainment world, we're out of Coruscant. She's not having to really watch her back so much there, so she can kind of relax a bit.
He's the networker in this,
exactly. He's kind of one who's smoothing everything over and probably really making the ship run a little bit smoother.
When he stood next to Davo and they're looking at the boy, and he's like, "Is he strong enough?"
Yeah,
she's strong-willed. Is he strong enough? And Davo's like, "Not by half." Little things like that.
It seems like the Chandrilan, the way things are, it seems like the female of the relationship seems to lead that. It's very much for kind of a leader. Where's the trousers, shall we say?
Yes.
In that relationship. It's nice that we've kind of got them on that planet for the whole time, and we've got this massive, huge wedding that's going on for God knows how much that would have cost credits and stuff.
Frightening. But then Luthen turns up with Claire. Yeah. Their little fractious little moment is quite interesting because people have talked about it in the intervening years. It's clearly Luthen's the senior member of this arrangement, but you wonder, is Claire kind of the brains as much as Luthen? And in that one, she was quite irritated with him. He wants to know, where's Cassian? Where's Cassian? What's happened to Cassian? I can't contact him from here, can I? I'll scrub the signals and try and find out what I can, but there's a limited amount of contacts she can do from a place that's probably as heavily watched as Chandrila.
And that makes it kind of frustrating for her, but she's been dragged out. But I guess like Luthen's like, well, we've got to keep up appearances, and you're like my assistant. So,
yeah.
And it is probably that thing of like, he is very much the face of the whole Axis rebel network.
Oh, totally.
And the idealist. But yeah, she's the one who's kind of getting things working and probably really doing the logistics.
Exactly that. She's the one that's up at 3 a.m. at the shop going over the board trying to listen. I thought it was fascinating as well because Davo's there and Luthen turns up and you learn that there's some sort of wedding gift and that Davo has purchased from Luthen. That feels like it's going to be something that plays forward into future episodes. So that was interesting. That's his reason for being there. Why else would Luthen? Okay, Mon is a regular customer. We know that from season 1. But why else would Luthen travel from, not that it's the furthest distance, from Coruscant to Chandrila? That was a neat thing. So you've got all those players in that place. And then, of course, we skipped to Mina Rao, which was the agricultural world. I think they filmed it in around Oxford. I think they laid a whole field full of corn specifically to film this. So that was actually filmed in the UK. Yeah. And that's where we find, obviously, Bix and B2 Willman and Brasso and new people as well, because obviously they've made a life for themselves in this new location.
Yeah, and Brasso's got a missus or...
Exactly. So that was really cool. So I love the aesthetic of that as well.
This first kind of block has really... What it's done is it's done that classic Star Wars thing of really kind of identifying and honing out like the world building, and identity of very specific locations. So like, it was when you do jump from place to place to place, from the jungle forest to the wedding back to Mina Rao and stuff like that, like, exactly where you are because like you can just tell by the aesthetic. This series, when I rewatched season 1 recently and I was watching the Aldani heist, I was like, my God, you literally couldn't get more of a World War II film than that episode. This very much feels like, these are the down pilots or the resistance fighters who are heavily embedded into like, Nazi Germany or like in France and stuff, who are having to really kind of watch what they're doing and stuff just to kind of get by, but also integrate so nobody else is, is really questioning them. And it's, bad timing as always. It wouldn't be drama if it wasn't for the ship to kind of like randomly just do an audit and stuff.
Randomly, waggling the air quotes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. It's that whole notion that they've got this planet. It's an agricultural planet and everybody's working for the Empire. It kind of makes sense. Like you can go back to like Roman times and that, like they would do these audits and kind of rock up and stuff and make sure that everybody's kind of like not smuggling away and withholding the grain and stuff. It doesn't matter if you're in Narkina 5 making these things which like part of the solar arrays on the Death Star, or you are actually in a grain field. Everybody's working towards and for the Empire.
That's right, and it gives you that sense of scale. That final shot in season 1 when you saw what they were doing at Narkina, and that was just one facility on Narkina. There's probably the whole planet's doing that, and Imperial facilities all around the galaxy, all working towards that one thing. That's how you build a planet killer like that. And here, like you say, there will be hundreds of thousands of worlds just like Mina Rao that are pulling in the grain or pulling in whatever it might be, going through the same stuff because the Empire is everywhere. Taxing. That's why I think this is where episode 1 now, 26 years on, is coming into its own. Oh, great. Taxation of trade routes. How boring. Wow. Well, think ahead. Star Wars is a long-term project. And now that's really coming home to roost. That whole thing about how the Empire funded what they did. They didn't just magic the money up. They had to bring the money in. And running an empire is not just oppressing people. It's taxing people. It's tariffs. How pertinent. It's all the things it's all the things that they do to make this system work. And this episode, in the most granular sense, is just part of that bigger picture.
You have to take a step back and go, wow. In your Venn diagram of Star Wars films and Star Wars films and stuff, like you can add another kind of join to like episode 1 to Andor and stuff like that. In Bad Batch, everybody had chain codes, didn't they? And now we're on Mina Rao, and for workers need visas. It's a way of tracking people and keeping an eye on where your people are and maybe who might be speaking out against the Empire and another planet obviously that is also feeding into the Empire and is possibly going to be completely devoured by the Empire is Gorman.
Gorman is such a key part of season 2. Yeah. And specifically in this first episode, we go to a place called the Maltine Divide, where Director Krennic is holding a meeting. It's clearly very secretive, and it's not just the top brass. And what I loved about this scene, one, the visuals was just amazing, but also the fact that he has picked people very, very specifically from all up and down the rankings of the Empire, and basically says, you speak to nobody of this meeting other than the people within your line of sight. You know, you're not here, you're somewhere else. I've brought you in for a specific reason. And of course, two of the people that we see are Ded Ramiro and Major Partagaz, two of the most interesting characters from season 1. And basically, we learned that Gorman is not only galactically well known because of the silk that's woven there by these Gorman spiders, which are really kind of weirdly cute, sort of spider-like creatures, but also that the propaganda machine has been working overtime because, as they say in that whole speech, the two guys from the propaganda department essentially are saying
Ministry of Enlightenment.
That's it. Yeah. Isn't there something about the Gore? Aren't they a little bit up themselves? Is basically what it's. Aren't they a little bit snooty and snotty? What they produce and what goes around the galaxy is of the highest quality, absolutely desired by people in certain circles, and the people that can't afford it, even they've heard of it. But would there be a huge outcry if something bad happened to them is essentially what they're saying. And of course, something bad's really coming because we learn that there's this calcite that's living within the core of the planet. That means they need to mine it. And if we aggressively overmine it, which we probably will, it might mean the end of the whole society. So it's just how do we get the galaxy to believe the lie more than the truth? How do we do that? Brilliant scene.
The historical undertones in that scene is just ridiculous. It's basically the Empire selling the destruction of a planet.
And whether or not the people around that table can cope with being a part of that, you sense that Dedra's a bit, I'm not so sure, and Partagaz is, you need to go for this, you know. And I think also because he's top end ISB, he's kind of saying, you know, if you don't, you already know too much, so you kind of got to.
It doesn't matter if you basically strip mine the absolute arse out of this planet, because actually the Gorman were a nasty bunch of people anyway, and the galaxy's better for them not being there. It's Tony Gilroy's kind of like writing at some of its best, really. And
it's very clever. It's very clever in that he's taking cues from that Second World War era, like Lucas did, but Lucas took it in broader strokes. Tony Gilroy can't do what Lucas did because it's a different type of story. So he's drilling into moments that you just referred to. It's such a clever bit.
Very specific things. But at the same time, you know, it's totally on point with what we've seen from the Empire for the last 50 years as viewers.
But don't you think that there was a brilliant moment where Dedra's looking out the window, just keeping her own counsel, and Krennic comes up to her and says, "What are you thinking?" And she kind of gives him a little bit, "I'm just trying to figure it out." And it's like, no, you already know what you want to say. Just say it. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
And basically the line she says, I think it's in the trailer, you need a radical insurgency that you can control. You need to set this up so they do the wrong thing at the right time. The whole concept of that little smile on his face it's his justification. The right thing bringing this one in. She's smart. Yeah. You know, she did the whole thing following the Starpath unit. She was there on Ferrix. You know, she's there for a reason. Obviously, Partagaz, you would imagine as an officer and an ISB guy, proved himself time and time again. So his presence is logical.
He's recommended her.
And then we return to this unknown jungle planet where Cassian has landed the ship and been pretty much immediately captured by, on first viewing, the most clownish bunch of fools lost in the jungle.
Pretty much, who've just kind of basically been abandoned by one of their brothers. It just shows you how far away we are from the Rebel Alliance being a Rebel Alliance.
Completely.
You know, this harkens back to season 1. Yeah, when Luthen visits Saw Gerrera and he's kind of reeling off all the different kind of factions and they're all working differently and stuff.
Yeah,
and this is one of them. Now Andor kind of figures out that we know who you are because we've been kind of supplying you.
And they've got no idea, have they?
And they just see everything at face value because they're like, oh, he's an Imperial pilot because he's
wearing an Imperial outfit flying the
exactly. Exactly. It's like,
but already you see he knows who he's there to meet. I'm here to meet the pilot, you know, and the pilot's not there, and they just feel abandoned. They're starving. There's nothing to eat. They start this whole fractious thing that he gets caught up in the middle of. It's basically where the episode ends is a big firefight kicks off. And it really did stand up strongly that even though these guys are a little bit clueless and there's a bit of comedic effect in there, and Cassian's trying to navigate that because not everyone's dead serious. And if all of Andor was dead serious, there'd be no light and shade. So it's kind of exactly. So it kind of works for its own thing. But yeah, you do realise that as this whole thing falls apart, he recognises them as the Maya Pay Brigade.
Yes.
And they're a little bit taken aback that he knows who they are. Why would an Imperial pilot know that? They never quite seem to get over the fact that they can't see beyond the uniform. But as the episode ends, it's brilliant in the sense that whilst I've seen people talk about it online. What was that whole scene about? The rock, paper, scissors stuff that they talk about later on, and they're just dismissing it. The whole point is that everyone in episode 1 is looking for Cassian in one way or another. Dead Ramiro still looking for Axis, and Cassian's tied to Axis. Luthen's panicking because Cassian's gone off the grid and there's no way to contact him from Chandrila. So everyone's wondering where he is. Back on Mina Rao, Bix and Cassian, and how do we, Cassian will be back soon because B2's always worrying about Cassian.
Exactly.
So everyone's wondering where he is. As in each corner of the galaxy, maybe apart from the Maltine Divide where they're planning the bad stuff. Everywhere else, you just know that it's building towards bad things.
And he's stuck with these jackasses on this jungle planet who are basically trying to work out how to, fly this TIE fighter.
Yeah.
And I don't have a clue. And it's like, it just shows just like how, they're not thinking about the bigger picture. To his point, it's very, it's very.
They don't know there's a bigger picture. They're only seeing that. Yeah. It's confusing to a point that Cassian doesn't need to know. All he needs to do is get
exactly.
To that
and I kind of think at this point you kind of don't necessarily need to know too much about it. You just kind of have to accept that, like, he's kind of stuck there. And he stays there. He doesn't try to help one group over the other. He sat there and he's kind of like, he's saying, look, it's raining. Think about you can collect some water. Think about like the practical stuff. Not necessarily like, right, okay, I can kind of help you guys overthrow him, because I think he's kind of still thinking, well, look, we're all fighting for the same end result. You guys are just squabbling like children, and you need an adult to come in and sort it out a bit.
And also, I think it feels a bit like Luthen is positioning things left, right, and centre. So he's having a meeting with Saw Gerrera, like we saw in season 1.
Yes.
Just to keep Saw sweet enough to still do the things that Luthen wants him to do. And he still feels like he's moving the chess pieces. And you just wonder, in relation to this Maya Pay Brigade, what was the payoff for them? What were they going to get? Were they going to get the ship? What were they getting? Were they getting information? Were they getting weapons? It's not quite clear yet. So I like the feeling that there's all these things happening that we're not privy to, and people at their level, just like when they sent Cassian to Aldani with Vel, we've been eating roots for 6 months and this guy's getting paid and things like that. So all these moving parts that Luthen's making, all these quick decisions, and it's probably not just Luthen, there's other people as well, but he's the agitator, isn't he? He's the one that's making these things happen.
Maybe what he's trying to do is he's trying to work out actually who's useful. Because on some levels, if you've got somebody who's starting to show, they want to kind of stand up against the Empire, well, then that at this point in time, like, you kind of need numbers, but then also you kind of need useful people and you need clever people. These guys, they're just standing up against a man because that's the thing to do. And
when they end up joining the rebellion at some point, they'll be grunts, essentially. They'll be
cannon fodder.
Frontline infantry cannon fodder.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But again, like, you could see that with that Anton Krieger, who was kind of used in the end as like collateral damage. These guys could just be like, again, like, okay, you could see Luthen going, right, okay, well, we'll keep them sweet, so we'll send them equipment. They can cause a little bit of hassle with like local Imperials on wherever sector they're from. That obviously then means that the Empire's attention split. But then at the same time, when push comes to shove and maybe you need a full guy, well, these guys, they're a pain in the arse.
Hi, this is Dave Chapman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Let's jump to episode 14, known as Sagroma Teema. This is where we really start to see some interesting developments in the Tay-Mon relationship. I think if ever we're going to see a wedding in a Star Wars show, this was a show to do it. I don't necessarily want to see like too many of them, because it kind of felt a bit like I was watching Game of Thrones.
Yeah, very much. We have seen a wedding in Star Wars. We saw it at the end of Attack of the Clones, but it was just the physical ceremony.
True.
We've never seen a stag do. We've never seen a hen night. We've never seen the wedding reception, and this is like as lavish as it gets.
Yeah,
but you're right. With Tay and with Mon, it's fractious.
So he's at the wedding. Perrin kind of making these swipey kind of comments like, "Oh, your boyfriend's here," and his wife's kicked
separated.
Separated. He's drinking more, by the sounds of and again, like, it's interesting how Perrin's kind of picking up on all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
the kind of stuff actually that he probably is more aware of that, because he's probably displayed those kind of traits himself. Bear in mind that he was indebted to Dave Scolding. He had gambling debts. he was probably drinking quite a lot, and those two kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So suddenly you see Tay kind of like staggering around and kind of like probably hitting the booze a little bit harder than he needs to, bearing in mind that he knows it's a 4-day kind of like affair and stuff like, because he's from like, 4 valleys over or something, I think they said. So he's a local lad. So he starts to lay on Timon like, look, everybody got what they wanted from this arrangement, but I kind of arranged and set up and got you out of a stick with the Empire. And the only person who's now feeling it is me. I'm the collateral damage. He's kind of saying, we need to talk about this. We need to kind of sort this out. Very unsettling, big close-ups, different angles that makes you kind of feel like, he's kind of slightly imposing his personal space as well onto me.
Yeah. It's tough because clearly they've been friends all their life.
Yeah.
So he's somebody, we saw it so much in season 1. When she was in a hole, he was the one she went to for help. He makes that introduction, which she's totally not happy about, and Vel isn't happy about. But then you realise that the daughter is actually the traditionalist in the family, and that's the way it was done on Chandrila before, and that's the way she wants to do it. It's very much a Naboo parallel as well. She's happy to be a traditionalist in the way that a mom isn't. And I think there's the guilt there with Mom that actually, this is going to help us hugely. So she has to get past that. I think by season 2, it feels like she has, and she certainly has by this episode. With Davos Goldrum, for example, and his family, it's a bit like new money, isn't it? There's a snobbery against people who've had an estate in the family since the 1600s and someone who, won the lottery in 1960. They think they are, but they're not really in the same world. Exactly. And it does feel a little bit like Davo and his family have kind of come from that, navigated it well, and clearly he's tremendously wealthy. He's like, it's not about the money. I just wanted to make an introduction, as he said in season 1. And now here we are at the back end of that conversation in Mon's offices. But with the whole situation here, with the wedding moving forward as it is, it's these little character moments that are just layering in, and I just find it fascinating to watch.
Well, I loved it in that first reception, and you've got Luthen who's talking to some Chandrilan Toph and his son is like at the Imperial Academy, and then like suddenly it's like, we're all moving to another planet, and like Luthen's like, tell me more. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's how he gets a lot of his information, because like he's doing it. He's getting pally with people, and everybody just thinks he's probably some flamboyant, slightly over the top Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen kind of Antika, and he's kind of harmless, but he's also the one who's going to have a knife at their throats when they're not expecting it. So
100%.
Very exciting.
Cassian's still captured.
Yeah.
Bodies are going missing in the jungle. So that's the big key moment there at the beginning.
For feet or 1 foot.
But also at ISB headquarters, you've got Dedra Meero and you've got Partagaz talking, and basically she's a bit iffy about wanting to do this, and Partagaz is basically saying, you've got to run this. You've got to go with it. She's come from where she was, coming into that circle, the ISB circle, and building her way up through season 1. And now, a year later, you see the payoffs of that hard work. And as you say, she's kind of stalled a little bit because getting access is no small thing. She can see the parts but can't pull it together. And again, you see the ruthlessness of climbing the ladder in the Imperial Army. He's giving her all the heads-ups that he possibly can. You need to do this. If you're going to progress, you'll stall, you'll end up running some little installation in the back end of nowhere. That's probably what happens to a lot of it. Or you get force choked by Darth Vader, or something happens nasty that doesn't end well for you. To see that, him putting his trust, that was what it said to me. It was, he's put his trust in her now. He can see the passion, he can see the logical mind and how she's making things work. So he's like, take this forward. This is your chance to progress your career. Take this forward now.
If he's put her forward to be part of Krennic's council, as it were, then ultimately, if she doesn't work out, it's kind of also down to him as well. He's clearly been around since way before the Empire back, so he knows how it's all running, and he can see, I guess, like what's the challenges she's got ahead. I mean, he even said after that very first briefing, watch your back.
We skipped to Mina Rao. The Imperial inspections are getting closer. You see that they're moving through these different areas and they're working their way towards them.
Yes.
So there's a nervousness about, well, we can't be here. We're not documented. We've got to kind of keep moving. And it's the first time we see a specific Imperial officer take an interest in Bix, which is something that progresses into a much, much bigger and dark situation. So we're starting to see the beginnings of that. With their scenario on Mina Rao, it's so sad in that they've got away from Ferrix at the end of season 1. Bix is having these nightmares. She's really struggling with the after effects of what happened to her when she was tortured. Brasso, as you say, has found a new relationship. B2's just as nervous as ever. Willman feels like quite the ladies' man. she's bringing him water in the fields, the girl that he's took a shine to. So they've all developed as characters. Again, I think that's the genius of following season 1, which was those 4 blocks, but are sort of concurrent stories. And now, I guess you look at each chapter of 3 episodes is essentially, you'd think, what the 5-season show could have been. Because there's so many gaps, because you're leaving a year between episodes. I can only assume Marvel, Del Rey, and all the other publishers are thinking, my goodness, what exactly, rubbing their hands together, thinking there's so much stuff we can get into in these. Even Diego Luna and Andrea Arjona said, can't we do a season of the year between season 1 and 2 where Bix and Cassian get together? There's a story to be told. So there's definitely stuff you can still mine in there.
The problem that I guess you have is that once this story is told, I don't think you can retell the story, as it were. This kind of feels like the definitive story to the lead up to A New Hope. That's fine. It just means that really at this point, after this, you kind of like probably need to kind of move on somewhere else and start doing fresher stories, which is what hopefully is happening. I mean, obviously, we're going to see how it kind of plays out this coming week when we jump a year and see actually how much and what has developed. So it will be the thing when we then go back and look at this second season as a whole is that then can we take a step back and go, okay, you originally wanted to do over 5 years and that was too big a deal, but maybe actually was it better to maybe do it over 2 years and make it 3 seasons or something? I don't know.
I mean, obviously the strike didn't help, the COVID didn't help.
There was so many different things, and and ultimately we've got what we've got, and so far it's fantastic. So and actually it's quite nice to maybe in this kind of day and age of having like these slow burn kind of shows, which to be fair, Andor kind of is, on season 1 kind of was very much. They kind of go, right, we're going to have a slow burn, but also we're going to have these whacking great big jumps. We'll see by the end of the season, but like you would think year on year, there'll be a stark contrast from the year before. We've got the Imperials here, who they've come down to Mina Rao, and they're starting to do the audits, and Imperial officers show their arrogance and also their ability to maybe feel like they are above the law. And that's what we start to see with that one lieutenant. You're in the Imperial Navy, you go from shipyard to shipyard, planet to planet. You've got a woman in every city.
Starport,
that's better, Starport. And so there's a romanticism of that, but at the same time, it's like there's also the arrogance and the darker side of it, and of what we start to see, and we start to see that very well because, we've got Bix. She's kind of, even at that point, she's stuck in working on this kind of machinery in this kind of like darkened area, and he's outside, and he's like, oh, it's fantastic here. The local city's only not so far away, but she's got nowhere to run and hide. And of course, he's laughing because he's like, oh, so you're married? Where's your husband? He's off planet. Well, that's a shame that we've just closed down all the comms and stuff, so you won't be able to kind of contact him and stuff. So bad times for you.
Exactly that. And it makes you wonder, if we take that as a broader thing, these Imperial officers who are probably used to doing whatever they like.
Pretty much.
And those Nazi parallels continue.
Exactly.
And he starts off, he's kind of trying to be charming and offhandish. And at first you're thinking, okay, he's chancing his arm a little bit. If she says no, she says no. And then there's that little part of you thinking, hang on, he's an Imperial. There's your rank and file soldiers. We saw it in Solo. You get drafted because you want to get off planet. What was Luke going to do when he left Tatooine in A New Hope? He was going to join the Imperial Navy so he could go and see the galaxy. So there's people who are sort of idealists without having a specific sort of propaganda to follow or anything else. They just want to get off that rock they've lived on their whole life. And then you get guys like this who, in this scenario, Bix is like, thanks but no thanks, I'm happily with somebody, and he's not used to somebody saying no, or he's not used to not getting his own way. That sort of develops and develops further as we get into later episodes.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Back on Chandrila, there's a very interesting sequence where Mon and Vel are walking, and you learn that there's been no contact with Cinta at all. Obviously, Vel and Cinta were together. So that also highlights the sacrifices that these people are making. Mon's making a different kind of sacrifice. She's living in this opulent, rich world. But if you sort of look at the morals and the risk and everything else, she's no better off than Vel was eating roots on Aldani. You know, they're all giving something up or giving something away. Mon is at the wedding of her daughter that she basically had to offer up on a plate.
Yeah.
You know, and now, as you said earlier, Tay's sort of much more present, much more agitated. That's really unsettling for Mon because, as we say, this is one of those people that she trusts almost without filter as much as she can. And now even he's giving her a hard time. It's an interesting episode from that point of view, I think.
You see it in season 1 where Cinder and Val are together, and Val is the one who's kind of holding back a little bit, and Cinder's all about the mission. And so, you know, emotions and relationships blur the lines and get entangled and stuff. I mean, if you look at Val in season 1, because they've been eating roots and stuff, like she's quite gaunt, she's quite cut up in the face, very bad, but like she's obviously been back on Chandrilla for a while because she looks like she's been eating a lot more than roots and stuff. And that's not an criticism, that's a bit of defining actually the people who have and the people who have not in this.
As a visual cue. Exactly. Yeah. It's just the thing. You've got Tay, who is very much at the moment. I don't think Mon's able to kind of like pin him down and say to Luthen, "Yeah, this guy's reliable and he's going to still have our back." Because ultimately, it starts to sound like actually he's wavering and he's leaning more towards Davos Stolden. He wants to get back in, get his money that he's lost and that because of the rebel activity and Mon's rebel activity. And he even says that quite plainly to her. Go back to season 1 and they're talking those kind of slightly double meaning and stuff. You were so talking around like her house and stuff, but like here he's just like, he's at that point where it's like, sod it, I don't care. Look. And he's probably more financially stitched up than he's probably letting on. He's trying to put a brave face, but ultimately it's not working, is it? It's not working at all. Another very interesting relationship thing that we learn in this episode, Cyril Khan and Dedra are a couple. I mean, you had that moment at the end of season 1 where they had that look at each other on Ferrix, but you didn't know where it was going to go because she was so cold and sort of all business with him. And now you see them together in this Coruscant apartment and they're kind of still cold and still sort of all business with each other. But when you realise that they are living together and there's a relationship, I was so glad they went there with that. I mean, there's very few times we actually see like the home life from Imperial, especially somebody who's so loyal to the Empire. So it's quite jarring in some respects. It's a slightly left turn that I don't think we were quite expecting. Not unwelcome at all. Oh, God, no. It's the gift. It is really the gift of the first 3 episodes. And if ever I'd want a sitcom in Star Wars, it would be those two and Cyril's mum. Yes. You know, that's fantastic. We wrap up the episode back on the jungle world. So Cassian has had issues. The two sides have split now. He's with one, there with the other. He basically helps maneuver a situation where they essentially play rock, paper, scissors, which I thought was quite funny. Yeah. Do you know what it reminded me more is actually from the Big Bang Theory, where they do rock, paper, scissors, lizard Spock. Because you think, if this is when this is when they're all it's going to kick off because they're like, I'm going to pick a second, which is what you used to do in like dueling pistols and stuff like that. You pick a second and stuff like that to finish it off if you kind of, if you can't manage it. But also I think what it really highlights is it just shows how these guys are just not thinking about stuff in the same kind of way. It's you kind of feel almost like these guys are just they've just joined this kind of faction just because it's maybe a little bit cool, maybe just kind of rally against society a little bit. I mean, you wouldn't see Saw Gerrera go, right, okay, we're gonna face off between 2 tubes and bore gullet in a rock, paper, scissors. It's just not the kind of thing you do. Be like, all right, go outside and kick each other's like heads in until like one of you comes back. But when you see them at that level, and then you see the partisan rebels of Saw, and then you see Phoenix Squadron, and you see all these little factions of rebels, you can see how they all come together to make the whole thing work with people like Luthen and Cassian interspersed and all the other characters we see in Rogue One. They've all come from somewhere. They've presumably come from factions, and it's all been brought together, and someone's going to make these things happen. Fascinating that Cassian manages to get a weapon. He gets back to the TIE Avenger. He leaves the planet and leaving them behind. And that's when we learn that it was Yavin 4 all along. You see the Massassi Temple, you see the gas giant. Yeah. Brilliant. That was the way we sort of cap off the episode. Oh, well, that's ironic. Very. Yeah. Andor's not thinking about self-preservation. So he's just like, he needs to finish a mission and also he needs to get back to Bix. Absolutely. And everyone's missing him. You've seen Cleia finally gets back to the board and she's checking for him. Nobody can find him. So again, like episode 1, it's like, where the heck is Cassian? Now we as a viewer know he was on Yavin 4 all along, which was kind of brilliant.
Hi, I'm Duncan Poe and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The final part of this block, Harvest, wow, I mean, this really kind of does wrap everything up in this first kind of story block very nicely. I mean, it moves around a lot. There's a lot going on in this episode, isn't there?
Heck of a lot. And I like that. When I watched it the first time, it really was almost jarring how quickly these episodes move in the first part.
For Andor, yeah. I think just for Star Wars in general, when you think about it, yeah.
It felt like the difference between the editing pace of the original trilogy and the editing pace of the prequel trilogy. When we used to, if you remember, we look back and go, God, it's moving fast. 5-second scenes, 10-second scenes, and you go from Tatooine to Geonosis and bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
We're kind of used to that now because that's the pace of Star Wars. In Andor, though, it's not. As you say, it's a much more thoughtful, slow, thought-provoking. You've got to let things baste in and simmer a little bit. This has done such a good job in that first block of putting people in locations and putting people in scenarios where you know that it's all going to simmer and come together. But at first, it's quite disconcerting. So we open this episode, Harvest, as you say, with that TIE Avenger sort of floating in space. Cassian's trying to figure things out. It's a little bit of a cluster, isn't it? He's a little bit disconcerted, but manages to get things up and running again because now we know he's heading to Mina Rao.
Yeah, see, now this was a thing, right? He wasn't repairing the ship. He was basically just trying to get power so he could power that comms unit. He got off planet. Right, now where am I headed? You can't rock up on Mina Rao in a stolen TIE if you're trying to kind of make sure that your friends and yourself are kept under the radar and not drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah.
You can't take it to Coruscant.
No.
So, like, obviously, you've got to wait for instructions and you've got to get this old comms unit kind of up and running and stuff.
He knows he's been out of contact for a while. He's going to know that Bix wants to know where he is. He's going to know that Clea wants to know. He'll know that Luther wants to know. And there's probably other people we aren't even aware of that would need to know where he is. So he knows he's got to get moving.
He's like doing what I think I would do in that case and kind of like go, right, let's see if we can get power from this thing somehow. And it was a nice break of attention when having just watched the second episode of that and he kind of ran straight in about it. It was quite a nice comedic moment where he just kind of goes flying off.
On Mina Rao, we skip back to Mina Rao and there's a beautiful big feast where everybody's about to eat. And there's just that good old-fashioned sort of Hobbit vibe, I would say. Everyone's together.
They're working on the harvest. You know, they're going to eat together and work together. And you've got the kids running around and the droids are playing with the kids and stuff. And there's a kid who's got like a carved-out like Wookiee bowcaster. And there's another one who's got like a little kind of ATST puppet and stuff.
Yeah. And we saw the little ATST thing in was it Caravan of Courage or Battle for Endor? One of the Ewoks has got one.
That's quite a nice little nod to that. But yeah, I mean, it also kind of slightly reminded me beginning of Kenobi where he's cutting up that big
the whale thing.
Yeah, it's that kind of vibe. Like the Mina Rao stuff's got that whole kind of like Western kind of vibe. Like you know, just about most shots seem to kind of like start on like a kind of windmilly type thing or something and kind of like pan in. And it immediately tells you exactly where you are.
It's a bit like the episode of Mando where you meet Cobb Vanth and you see the township of Mos Pelgo, and you know it's just people living their lives. It's a regular, out of the way sort of place, and that's like a one-horse town, isn't it?
That's a one-street town. That was
literally, yeah. But this people working, it's what Ferrix was in season 1. It was so beautifully detailed and built out, and it's kind of a bit like that. I love the layout of that, juxtaposing going back to the wedding where you know Mon's talking to Leda and saying you don't have to do this if you don't really want to, but she's kind of saying it in a way that's not exactly saying don't do it. She's still walking that tightrope of, well, I'm a mother, but I'm also the mother of a rebellion, essentially. Exactly. And she's got to find the middle point, which was fascinating. And then probably my favourite scene in the whole of the first 3 episodes, and there's some great stuff in there. Dedra, Edie, Cyril, the meal. That scene when Cyril Gusson throws himself on the bed in a huff, which apparently that was cold solid. It wasn't in the script. He just did that off the top of his own head. And Dedra laying the law down to Edie, and Edie just almost happy as she took it. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was
brilliant.
Of all the things to be a highlight in a Star Wars show, a dinner scene, you know, with some really ropey looking fondue. It's very admirable that she stood up for Cyril. The whole thing about when she's there in the mirror picking out the outfits and she's having to put on some kind of like, you know, really forced smile, which is just like...
I was lucky enough to do the press junket thing. And one of the people I spoke to was Denise Goff. And in real life, she's the smiliest, like the biggest, brightest. And yet when she's Dedra, she's got like this Judge Dredd face on her. I don't know how she does it. She looks so severe. And yet in real life, she's like Piers Larry.
That scene, besides the interesting like interrelationship dynamics between those two, it's really weird because it's such an austere apartment.
That's a good word.
You know?
Yeah.
And you kind of go, it's all white. it's like she's just kind of like basically brought an IKEA showroom.
Yeah.
And they're in like monochrome stuff as well. They're like black and white, outfits and stuff. There's a bit of a warmth there between the two. And they're, I don't imagine they're the most kind of snuggly of people. I don't necessarily see them like walking down through a plaza holding hands or anything. I mean, I could be wrong.
It could be wrong. I like the fact that there's definitely an understanding between Edie and Dedra. That's important. I think also because of what Dedra does as a job, you think she's a multi-layered personality. You learn she was raised in an orphanage, apparently.
Well, this is the thing.
A kinder block.
Just that one line basically explains that character more than anything else. Trying to do the math and that. And she was probably in an Old Republic Kinderblock, which then became an Imperial Kinderblock, but probably at the point whereby her formative years were going to be very much formed by the Empire. As far as she's concerned, the Empire can do no wrong. It provides structure and stuff. But like Edie says, there's no mother. There's no nice, warmy kind of like homely touch and stuff. Yeah. And that's quite apparent in the apartment. And so therefore, from very early on, Did was there just to serve the Empire. Basically, she knows that she'll probably go into service for the Empire. Maybe that's part of the agreement. It's like, okay, we're going to look after you. And then you're going to go and serve the Empire.
And there was also another brilliant moment in that exchange between the two when Edie, if she's mentioned Uncle Harlow once, she's mentioned him 100 times. And when Dedra says, I wouldn't be throwing that name around too much because we've been keeping an eye on Uncle Harlow. It's not a name you want to be.
I've read his record. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Just that she's on top of everything. So
she's got the leverage.
So by the time Cyril comes back in the room after his little huffy teenage moment, like, oh God, the mood has changed. That is just a relationship that you said it earlier. If there's a sitcom to make, that's the sitcom.
So obviously they were thrown together because of circumstance, and he kind of was quite creepily and stalkily in the first season. Wait for her outside work and stuff like that, basically. And then he kind of rescues her from getting
probably just battered to death, probably.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. However, she is an up and coming rising star in the ISB. Yeah. He is someone who is basically in the Imperial
weights and measures sort of thing.
Weights and measures, and he's been promoted because he worked out that there was some kind of underhanded bezzling going on in 4 sectors and stuff. Now, there's a part of me that kind of thinks that maybe now that she's off of the Axis case, that she's kind of slightly keeping him around because he might come in handy later on.
Yeah.
I kind of just get that feeling like that might be the thing that happens. So actually, whilst they're kind of together, I kind of feel like there might be a slight ulterior motive between Dedra and that. She's thinking about the game plan. You don't imagine kids will be in their future. She's a career woman.
I also think Dedra and Cyril have probably got a room not unlike the room that Bruce Willis and Marcellus Wallace end up in Pulp Fiction. There's just a hint of that about their relationship as well.
They're definitely a master-slave. Yeah,
exactly that. There's levels to this relationship. The wedding's progressing, the wedding's moving forward. Everything's pretty much tickety-boo there, but of course, there's still that simmering nervousness about Cassian being missing, but you do see Cassian has contacted Claire at some point. There's a communication there, so at least they know that Cassian is alive. But really, I think the bulk of this story, outside of that wedding, is on Mina Rao, where the Empire's getting nearer. They're trying to circumvent it, but they can't. And we do end up with the scene that has obviously caused a lot of attention and brought a lot of attention, the Imperial officer and Bix. There's no good or easy way to say it. It's a tough scene to discuss, and it's a tough scene to watch. That word is used.
I mean, the scene itself, brilliantly shot and played by everybody in the cast. It's fantastic. And I think also brave. This is a show that can handle it. For me, any other Star Wars, and it would stick out like a sore thumb. It's not like this happened in episode 2. We kind of get the start of it and the kind of hint, the foreshadowing what's going to go on.
Yeah.
So that when it happens, when he corners her in that kind of Winnebago type caravan thing, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's like mobile home. We can do a whole episode on whether or not Star Wars should have this kind of stuff in it or not. I personally think that actually, if it's justified in the show, then it's fine. But it makes it difficult because the wide ranging demographic of people who watch this show.
But you just said it perfectly. This show can take a scene like that. This show can carry a scene like that because as broad as the bigger picture of what Andor is doing to take us to Rogue One, to take us to A New Hope couldn't be bigger, more galactic. It's the most granular show in terms of relationships. And so as you say, you saw him kind of sliming his way around a little bit and trying to be charming and being a bit of a creep. And she's like, I'm not interested. My husband's off planet. And now here he is like, I'm gonna get what I want, because he thinks he's at the farthest point of being in the Roman Empire, and he can do what he wants without consequences.
Exactly.
And it obviously comes back to bite him very much on the arse.
Fair play to Bix. She fights back. She fights back hard. That lieutenant, you wonder actually how many other, they're on was it Harvest 500 or something, or they were at 800 before. So you wonder, even on that planet, how many other victims there are. I assume he's dead. I think he must be, mustn't he? Yeah. Actually, I think what they did, which is, I think, a little bit clever. She says, he tried to rape me, which I think is the most stark way of just spelling it out. That's it. But the fact he kind of staggers out and then kind of brains himself on the side of that bench, and that's what finishes him off. There's some kind of payoff on that in some respects. There's a slight comicness about the way that happened as well, which kind of softened that scene a little bit.
Also, a lot of it's implied. Yes. You don't see anything. There was more sexuality in season 1 with Bix and Tim, I think, her partner before who got shot on. In that episode, it was like, oh, well, there's no doubt in what they were up to.
Came out for a hookup,
Exactly. So, and that was fine. But again, what you said, it's a much more adult show. Yes, it's Star Wars. I know some Star Wars commentators, and I use that phrase very loosely, have picked on this as another thing to attack Star Wars with. I think they're way off the mark. Wow, come on. How hypersexualized were Twi'lek slave girls in Return of the Jedi? George was doing this 40 years ago. Not as completely on the nose as this. You can make up your own stories if you want it, but there's never been anything that says anything untoward happened to Leia. That was Jabba asserting his control over her, because he knows she's a princess. He knows who she is. Exactly. He's putting her in an awkward position.
He's rubbing her face in it. Yeah,
exactly that. But here, we know where that would have gone if Bix wasn't such a strong character.
First episode of season 1, we see Andor walking into the brothel.
Where his sister was supposed to be, totally was, completely was.
You kind of got to be a little bit careful as to what you do with her next. Don't want her to just become this victim, and especially victim, or her storylines have got a certain kind of sexual aspect to them. Does that make sense? I mean,
it makes all the sense. Yeah, it's a difficult balance to find. And speaking of difficult balances, you're on me in a row. The Empires come in, they're now very present. They're guns in people's faces. There's no good way around it. Cassian is roaring his way in to get back to the planet in his tie. And Brasso, what a great character.
Yeah.
Somebody that we've connected with. He's Cassian's best mate. There's a Han and Chewie vibe to the two of them.
Yeah, it's a really fatherly figure as well.
He's the logical, keep your head on, do what your mom says, because Marva obviously was a huge influence on Cassian. He's taken her final words and given them to Cassian in a way that nobody else could have done. And there's a trust, and they're not in each other's pockets and stuff. And clearly they've been apart for a while because Cassian's off on mission. And for Brasso to go down the way he does, it was tough.
And actually, one thing they did very well in this first block, they did it with Cassian when he takes out that range trooper. And then also then with Brasso, is that the actual hit is kind of implied, because you see that stormtrooper, all the others are kind of running and gunning and stuff, but that stormtrooper is there, slightly taking his time, sighting them up. And so, what's going to happen. So, again, it's kind of you don't need to show it all.
As you say, Cassian's come in, he's just tearing the place up in that ship. He's figured it out. Well, now he's got that ship completely where he wants it. So he's doing all the things that you'd like to think he would have done in episode 1, but didn't know the ship well enough. Him losing Brasso is such a tough moment. But then we go back to Chandrila, because we're hopping around a lot. The wedding's happening. But now we're pretty much at the after party. We've got 2 big things, I think, happen. Tay gets taken away, and we learn that Cinta is the driver. That whole conversation between Luthen and Mon that happened earlier, where Luthen is essentially saying he's a loose end that needs tying up.
Yeah, totally.
Mon can't quite get a head around it. It's pretty heavily implied that when Cinta drives him away, this is not a good place for Tay to be at this point.
No, exactly. It's very kind of Godfather-esque, isn't it? Tay keeps on saying, "Oh, we're talking about it after the wedding, Matt." And Luthen's like, "Yeah, has he given you a figure? Do we know how much we're talking about? Are we talking about a couple of 100,000 credits or million credits or something like that?" But more and more, Tay is kind of he's kind of going, "Well, hanging out with Davos and Matt is, it's really cool, and he might be able to help me." And he's kind of very much implying that actually to Mon, he's kind of got the leverage on her as well. From Luthen's perspective, he's like, right, well, I don't know this guy. Regardless of your relationship to him, you're gone. Can't have you kind of running around and potentially lean on Mon Mothma when you get back to Coruscant, because that ain't going to fly.
No, and it's in a show that's all about the sacrifices that get us to where the rebellion was ready to do Yavin. And we're still 4 years away from Yavin, so there's still plenty of time. But you can see all the characters that make all the sacrifices, and this is a huge one. And I think that leads to, again, another worldy in terms of Star Wars sequences, having the Nyamos music come on. I think Tony Gill was basically saying, it's like a chart hit in the Star Wars galaxy. Everybody knows that song. And Mon just dancing like there's no tomorrow.
Necking some shots and just...
Totally. Never imagined we would see her character, of all characters, just think, screw it, and, and just dance, and it doesn't matter. I've lost too much today. I've lost my best friend, as it stands, as far as we know at this point. I've lost my best friend, and I've just given away my daughter to an absolute scumbag. It just feels like we're at the top of the cliff and we're about to go down. It's like we're right at the top point now. It's a brilliant scene.
It just shows that she's got to that point, and you kind of feel like from that point now she's completely all in. She's kind of like, well, that's it. It's rebellion or bust. It's like, and rebellion and probably even self-preservation.
There's nothing else to lose at this point. But from the bigger picture, and you've got people like Luthen who are assessing the broader landscape, even more than Mon in this moment, because we'll talk numbers tomorrow. We'll figure it out. No, there's no figuring it out. His clock's just run out. Cut back to Mina Rao, where the remainder of our crew, minus now Brasso, leave the planet in that TIE Avenger, which is obviously quite a big vehicle as far as TIE fighters go. We always thought it was like a single cockpit little thing.
There's 2 jump seats. Slightly convenient that actually Brasso is no longer. Yeah.
But Brasso's the kind of guy, but I'll stay here, you guys go. He would have done that.
Well, exactly. I kind of almost feel like he would have been the one. Yeah, he's the one who sounds like has kind of taken more roots on that planet. Yeah. Really,
he could have mixed in. He could have.
Yeah,
he could have done that. So another brilliant episode. I mean, as a block, just to wrap this episode up. And I'm so glad we're doing Reaction Chat again, because I've really missed doing these. To bring those 3 episodes together as a chunk of time, and kicking off the first of 4 chapters of season 2 of Andor: A Star Wars Story. And I love this, Andor: A Star Wars Story. I think that's a great title for it. Where do you sit with that? I think it's done a great job of just putting everyone in their place, raising the stakes. We know in episode 4, we're going to step forward another 12 months. So we're going to find the characters in a different headspace with different stakes. Things would have progressed by 12 months. Exactly. Where do you sit with these 3 episodes?
I'm not one for kind of giving like 5-star ratings on the first 3 episodes. I give my star ratings like once a season's kind of finished, and you kind of see it. But the pacing has ramped up, which I think has actually helped the series massively. It's really helped just to keep things ticking over. And really, I think, because it's all over that wedding, it's the events of like 4 days, really, isn't it?
Pretty much.
It's 4 days in 1 year. But that 1 year's given us a massive snapshot. And I think, like with Krennic, even to those guys, is like, look, this is the Emperor's Light energy project. It's a lie within a lie, in all kind
unlimited power.
Exactly. Yeah. Unlimited power. We can bring great commerce for the galaxy and stuff like that. And so what if we kind of kill a couple of spiders just to do it? What's that matter? There's other planets with big spiders on.
Yeah, spiders aren't rare in Star Wars. It's no big deal.
It's fine. Yeah. But it's just such a expertly played. I mean, Genevieve O'Reilly, just you cannot. I mean, bear in mind, and this is the thing, like when you think about it, you take a step back and you go, this woman was in a deleted scene from a film that is 20 years old.
You see the back of her head in one scene at the very beginning of the film. Yeah,
exactly. And that's it. And yet, they kept her on, not just like she's some actress. She is fantastic. Like,
that's such a great point. I've never thought of it in those terms. Robin Gurland, when she cast for Revenge of the Sith, she deserves the biggest bunch of flowers and a bottle of champagne.
I don't know, but like you probably think she's just looking at it going like, here's a picture of Caroline Baxton. Oh, we need this. We need somebody who looks like Mon Mothma 20 years younger. Oh, she'll do. She looks about right. Yeah. And she can act. But to what we're getting now blows my mind.
That's a really good point.
Blows my mind.
That is a really, really good point. Yeah, it is. And to every level, to every degree of what you'd want to find in a Star Wars project. Bearing in mind, like we just said a minute ago, Skeleton Crew was pitched at everyone. It's the Goonies. It was just so much fun. We had Kiriana Kratter on the live stage when we did Good Morning Tatooine and Making Tracks at Celebration. That will be coming out very soon. She was wonderful, and that was that. Acolyte was something else, and Mando is so something else. But they're all in the same galaxy. As me going to ride on a Disneyland ride is in the same galaxy as going to have my back teeth out. They're not the same experience, but they're happening in the same world to the same person. And here's Andor telling quite mature stuff, very mature stuff. It's deep, it's layered, it demands a level of thought from the viewer that other Star Wars doesn't.
It challenges the viewer. And I think we need that. And this franchise is old enough and ugly enough to be able to have something like this. It might necessarily be like everybody's cup of tea, but that's fine, because like the next thing that comes along is it's probably going to be Visions, like season 3 or something like that.
Yeah, Tales of the Underworld.
Yeah, there's going to be something for everything. But I think the kind of story that Tony Gilroy's been asked to tell and is telling, I think you've got to do it at this kind of level and really give it some thought. And I think if you don't, I think it would be a shame and it'll be a wasted opportunity.
It gives you another great reason to go back and watch Rogue One and watch A New Hope. I think it's just adding to everything we've loved for nearly 50 years.
So that, I think, wraps it up for this first block of time for Reaction Chat. And we will be back very, very soon. Some point in this week coming when we had a chance to watch episode 16, 17 and 18. I'm sure
4, 5 and 6 of season 2, yes.
The numbers are confusing me.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe, take care, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.